Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh, dear brothers and sisters. Welcome to the BeQuran Podcast, your space for spiritual reflection, Quranic insight, and guided discovery. I'm your host, Ali.
And I'm Fatima.
Today, we're taking you deep into one of the most profound and soul-stirring chapters of Islamic history, the story of Imam Hussein and the Battle of Karbala. This isn't just a historical account, it's a legacy that continues to echo across generations, inspiring movements, awakening consciences, and stirring hearts.
We'll unpack the moral clarity, courage, and compassion behind Hussein's stand, explore the turning points that led to the tragic day of Ashura, and reflect on how the story continues to be a light for those who seek justice in a world still full of oppression.
Let's begin. Bismillah. Have you ever thought about those stories, the ones that just don't stay in history books? You know, the ones that really echo down through generations, shaping beliefs, sparking action, for centuries even, across borders, across time? Well, today, in this deep dive, we're really getting into one of the most, extraordinary of those stories, the story of Hussein and the Battle of Karbala. It's this event that's resonated so deeply for over 1,300 years, and it offers so much more than just dates and facts. So our mission for you today is to give you a real shortcut to understanding this incredible moment. We want to explore how Hussein's completely selfless pursuit of moral justice, right in the face of just brutal oppression, how that became this lasting source of hope, of empowerment for millions. We'll pull out the key nuggets, the most important insights from the material, hopefully offer some surprising details, and enough context so you can really grasp its significance. Okay, so to really understand the kind of courage Hussein showed later on, we probably need to go back to his early life. It sounds almost, legendary, this strong moral compass he had from the start. What can you tell us about those early years?
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it, how those values were just so deeply ingrained from childhood. Hussein, born 626 AD in Medina, he was the grandson of Prophet Muhammad, beloved grandson. And he grew up in this family environment just renowned for honesty, for compassion, for justice. The sources actually say he was so universally respected that, and I'm quoting here, every lover of truth and every lover of justice loved Hussein. He literally grew up in, what was seen as the holiest, most foundational place for that early Muslim community, learning directly from his grandfather. And that early experience, witnessing his grandfather's struggle to build a just society, it profoundly shaped his commitment to living sincerely, humbly, always prioritizing charity, working to improve society.
But even with such strong foundations, the world can shift, can it? It's kind of amazing how quickly things can unravel. What were those key moments, those political shifts after the Prophet's death that really set the stage for this massive confrontation later on?
Right. If you zoom out a bit, this whole period, it really shows this kind of steady moral decay in society, a real move away from those core principles the Prophet had set out: justice, humility, governing for the people. So after Prophet Muhammad passed in 632 AD, the leadership of this new nation, it immediately fell into dispute, and that led to this violent power struggle, fracturing the community for over 30 years. There was even a long civil war between Hussein's father Ali ibn Abdul Talib, who was obviously a central figure, and Muawiyah. Muawiyah came from a tribe that had initially opposed the Prophet, and eventually Muawiyah took full control after Ali was assassinated.
Wow. And that instability, it didn't just stop with Muawiyah taking power, did it? I mean, there was this sort of fragile peace based on a treaty, but that fell apart pretty quickly too, revealing the real nature of the new regime.
Exactly. So Hussein's older brother, Hassan, he made this treaty with Muawiyah. And one key part was that Muawiyah wouldn't pass rulership to his own son, but, that treaty was broken, and Hassan himself, he was assassinated about 10 years later. Then Muawiyah let his son Yazid take power, and Yazid, the sources widely describe him as a tyrannical and cruel narcissist, someone who wanted to rule with an iron fist. And for that kind of oppressive rule, Yazid desperately needed Hussein's allegiance, really needed it. It was crucial for him to cement his own claim, to get some credibility because, as the sources point out, when prominent members of the society
who are respected for their high morals back a ruler, it gives them legitimacy, even an oppressive one.
Right. And that's kind of steadfast refusal, especially facing that kind of danger. It's just incredibly. Hussein had seen years of injustice, that moral decay you mentioned. What gave him that courage, that unyielding stance against such huge odds?
How did the sources talk about his no-compromise stance?
Yeah, that's a really important question, isn't it? About conviction, about leadership. Hussein felt he absolutely had to draw a line to stop what he saw as the total collapse of the nation to the hands of a despotic tyrant. So he flat out refused to pledge allegiance to Yazid, unequivocally. And he made it clear this wasn't about power for him. It was about waking people up, showing them how far things had slipped morally since the Prophet's time. His stand was, divisive, sure, but intentionally. It was meant to separate the good from the bad, the just from the unjust. And the sources, they frame his moral principle as crystal clear. We must be willing to take a stand and even die for what is right. No compromise, full stop. He apparently got several offers, ways out, different paths, but his refusal to bend, even facing death, that's presented as the key to the morality, the ethics of his justice. And unlike, most leaders who kind of remain in their comfort zones and send their people out, Hussein literally led from the front.
So Yazid's threats then basically forced Hussein out of his home. Can you tell us about that public appeal he made in Mecca? What was the core principle he was really driving home there?
Yes, exactly. To avoid bloodshed in his hometown, Hussein left Medina for Mecca, and there he gave this really passionate sermon. He directly called out the community leaders who hadn't stood up to Yazid. He challenged them, saying things like, "You have taken lightly your duties as leaders, and you have neglected the rights of the oppressed, but have assiduously pursued what you regard as your personal rights."
So that sermon, it really crystallized his belief that true leaders have to put universal justice above their own gain, even if it means, the ultimate sacrifice.
And the events just before the battle, they're so incredibly moving, especially that detail about him giving water to his enemies, only for them to turn around and deny it to his family. It's just, the irony is almost unbearable.
It truly is. So Hussein had received all these letters, hundreds of them from Kufa, that's in modern-day Iraq, a major city and historically a center for support for his family. They were pledging their support against Yazid. So he leaves Mecca with his family, his loyal companions, heading towards Kufa, but then they get intercepted by a battalion of Yazid's army and led by this commander, Hur. And Hur is interesting because his own conscience gets tested later. They stop Hussein in this dry desert area called Karbala, prevented them from going any further. And right there, even though this confrontation is looming, Hussein shows its incredible humanity, even to the soldiers blocking him.
He did. Her soldiers, their horses, they were all desperately thirsty, parched. And Hussein, even though they were starving him, he selflessly offered them water from his own supply. But this act of kindness, it was met with just sheer cruelty. Yazid's army then surrounded Hussein's camp, cut off their water supply. For 3 days, in that blistering desert heat, Hussein and his family, his small group of maybe 72 followers, completely cut off from water. And it was during that time, that awful time, that Hussein made this really insightful comment about human nature. He said something like, "Human beings are slaves to the world as long as our situation is fine. But when people are tested, when people are tried, very few people remain who are sincere and devoted." And this was a test of the absolute highest order.
Wow. To see that kind of loyalty, knowing death was almost certain, that must have been incredible. What happened on the night before the battle and then on the actual day of Ashura?
Yeah, what's really striking is just the sheer resolve, the depth of belief shown by Hussein and his companions, even facing, unimaginable loss. So on the night before Ashura, Hussein gathered everyone. He asked for the lamp to be put out. He told them, "Look, I'm the target. You're free to leave under the covet of darkness. No blame on you at all." But then, one by one, every single one of them stood up, reaffirmed their allegiance. They chose to stay. So as the sun came up on the day of Ashura, Hussein and his, quote, brave army of 72 prepared to make their final stand for honor, for dignity, against an army of thousands. And then there's this incredible twist. The commander who'd stopped them, he defected, came over from Yazid's army, realizing he'd made a terrible mistake, he said, pledged to fight alongside Hussein, and he died fighting for him.
That's extraordinary.
And the sources, they describe incredible heroism, right, from all of Hussein's companions.
Oh, absolutely. They paint this picture of people completely unafraid, fueled by this belief in something greater. They fought relentlessly right to the very end, often reciting apparently extraordinary poetry as they charged into battle, making it clear they were fighting for the cause, not just out of personal loyalty to Hussein. And even in the middle of all that horror, watching his friends, his family being killed, Hussein himself would be heard praying for his enemies, hoping they'd just stop the atrocity. The personal cost for Hussein himself is hard to even comprehend, witnessing his family members fall like that.
It's almost too much to imagine. One after another, his closest family members, sons, nephews, his brother, they fought heroically and were killed right there. And Hussein would rush out onto the battlefield trying to aid them in their last moments, watching them fall right in front of him. And then maybe the most heartbreaking detail of all, no one was spared. Not even Hussein's 6-month-old baby son, Ali Asghar. Hussein apparently carried the baby out onto the battlefield, held him up, appealed to the enemy's humanity, saying something like, "Is this infant the one you have a problem with? Can't you even give him water?" And this apparently caused some unease, some hesitation in the ranks opposite him, but their commander ordered the hesitation silenced, ordered the child killed, and a soldier fired a 3-pronged arrow, hitting the baby in the neck, killing him right there in his father's arms.
Oh my God. After going through all that, facing those odds, what were his final moments like?
He was utterly alone by then, completely exhausted. He'd been fighting almost single-handedly against huge numbers, surrounded. But the accounts say right up until his last breath, he never lost hope, never showed despair. In fact, some of the soldiers fighting against him later reported they'd never seen anyone who'd lost so much, covered in wounds, facing certain death, yet be so peaceful and so glorious at the same time. He carried his lifeless baby back to the camp, said a final farewell to the women and children, then still unbroken, still unafraid, he charged the enemy one last time, fought majestically, they say, until he finally fell from his horse. He was attacked from all sides then, kicked, and eventually mercilessly beheaded. Thirsty, covered in wounds.
And the horror didn't stop even then, did it?
The aftermath for the survivors sounds just as brutal. No, it didn't. After Hussein was killed, all those who had fallen beside him were also beheaded. The women's tents were set on fire, looted, and the surviving women and children, they were taken as prisoners. The sources describe them being transported brutally, first to Kufa, then to Damascus, paraded, humiliated, interrogated.
But it was his sister, Zainab, who really stepped up then, didn't she? Carried his mission forward. Her strength, her ability to somehow see beauty in all that horror, and her voice. It's almost impossible to fathom that resilience.
How did she turn that loss into a legacy? Yeah, connecting this to the bigger picture, Zainab's courage was absolutely pivotal. Her determination to tell the story, in short, Hussein's legacy sacrifice, wasn't just an ending, but a catalyst for change, an enduring symbol. She really became the moral anchor for the other captives. And famously, yes, when asked later, how she saw what had happened, she gave that profound reply, "I saw nothing but beauty," which wasn't, denying the horror or the pain. It was affirming the moral victory, the beauty of the sacrifice for truth. And then in the courts of Yazid himself, she delivered these incredibly powerful, fiery speeches, publicly denouncing his leadership, indicting him right there, making sure, as the sources say, that the story of Karbala and its lessons will never be forgotten. She really laid the foundation for what came next.
And her actions, her words, they had a real direct impact, didn't they, on Yazid's rule and beyond?
Oh, absolutely. As word started to spread about what actually happened at Karbala, how Hussein and his small group were killed, Yazid began to realize he'd made a huge miscalculation. Public opinion was turning. He eventually freed Hussein's family, and Zainab, along with Hussein's only surviving son, Ali Zain el-Abidin, who was ill during the battle, they began to meticulously tell people exactly what had happened, the details, the injustice, and this sparked a series of uprisings, which eventually led to Yazid Tool being dismantled. So that legacy continues to inspire people, this idea of creating a Husseini society, meaning, a community built on those core values Hussein embodied: justice, courage, standing up for truth. So this story really does keep resonating today, more than 1,000 years later. For millions all around the world, absolutely. It's remembered every year by millions, people from all sorts of backgrounds, as this incredibly powerful source of empowerment in the ongoing struggle for moral justice. The way it's seen is that Hussein and his 72 companions, by sacrificing their lives, they were actually victorious against a tyrannical enemy, a moral victory. So the commemoration, it's really about the quest for justice and goodness in the world. It connects deeply to all the accounts of oppression, of tragedy, and of brutality that we still see in the world. And it holds out this hope, this desire for something better. And his message, it really does transcend religious borders and political borders. Why? Because fundamentally, justice is a human thing. It really is.
So Hussein's story, Karbala, it's not just history, is it? It's this profound narrative, moral courage, selflessness, that unwavering stand for justice. And it clearly still speaks to us today. And it makes you think, this story reminds us that sometimes standing up for what's right, it might mean being willing to sacrifice, well, everything. So maybe a thought to leave with is this. What does it mean for you in your own life to stand for truth and justice, echoing that spirit even in small ways when you face your own challenges, big or small? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and keep seeking the truth.